one where poverty is like eradicated, okay? Because when he was president, at that time he became president, you had high rates of poverty among the elderly. High rates of poverty. Medicare did not exist. So they were being bankrupted by, health issues. You had a lot of kids that didn't have access, to early developmental education. And so some of you mentioned the last time, you mentioned like food stamps and stuff. We get that not with the New Deal, we get it with, where did I go? There we go. We get that with LBJ's War on Poverty. So this is when you get Medicaid and Medicare. They're passed by the Medicaid-Medicare Act of 1965. Medicaid's health insurance for low-income families, and I'm not being super detailed here. Medicare is that health insurance you get when you turn 65, you're eligible for it, right? And after, you can look at the charts, and you will see there's this like poverty rate is high for elderly people. You get to 65, and it starts to go down significantly because of Medicare. Do not touch the Medicare. Any politician that tries to touch Medicare, Republicans and Democrats and Republicans say, do not touch my Medicare. Okay, that's how important it is in people's lives. You're seeing recent cuts to Medicaid, right? You might have heard about that, and there's getting a good bit of backlash from that. We're going to continue to see the fallout from cutting Medicaid, and so you may see more backlash. Food stamps, that's that SNAP program, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. It used to be stamps, now it's like an EBT card, like a debit card. Head Start, that's where, in many states, they don't have a lottery program that funds a state pre-K program. We do have that here, right? Okay. Before that existed though, if you were at a certain income level or lower, you could qualify for Head Start, so you could send your kid to pre-K and the cost would be covered. Now, because Georgia has a lottery funded program, all of us can send our kid to a Georgia lottery pre-K program, no matter your income to college. Some people look down on the program and still send their kids to the private classroom. My son went to like Primrose one year, and there was we'll take you to the lottery funded room. And then these kids go to the the private, the high income room, right? The people that paid for it. Anyway, so this was the first time, okay? This decade is the first time the federal government gets involved in ensuring access to health care, ensuring access to nutrition and education. Y'all know about work study? You can qualify to get a job on campus, and that helps to cover your tuition. It's to help more people be able to go to college. And we've done even more since then, right? 1970s, you get, after 1970s, you start getting federal loans and stuff. So, first time the federal government gets involved in higher education. Do you think it was controversial in the 1960s? It was. Yeah. It absolutely was. Oh, the federal government's going to pay for people to go to college now? It was absolutely controversial. Let me show you something. I think I got the image here. Let me pull it up. Let's see here. I don't think it's in the PowerPoint. I'm pretty sure it's not. Amazing. I should have thought of the PowerPoint. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Okay, it's not. This is during the Obama administration. Remember the Public Works? So we had the Great Recession of 2008, and so of course he didn't become president until after that started. But one of the first things he and Democrats did in Congress was pass this stimulus bill, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and so you got a lot. This is like the sign you see. You'll see the name of the law, that actually funded it, and that's the kind of sign you'll you'll see, on that next exit. All right, I was looking for something, let me see if I can just Google it real quick. Reagan Medicare. Look at that, there's a video.
With Wix. For your words?
Except or looking for 15. Now, Congressman Farran wrote.
He's talking there, it's probably a little too long, let's see, and that's all I can do right there. Yeah, there we go. So, you can see it there, right? Ronald Reagan speaks out against socialized medicine. Who's Ronald Reagan? He was a president, right? Not then, okay, he was president when we had color, okay? He became president in 1980. But he was governor of California, right? So he was in politics before he was president. And this is him campaigning against Medicare. Okay? So what sometimes was controversial in the past is not anymore. Does that make sense? But anytime the federal government expands its role into an area, you're gonna see some pushback and debate about it, and that's fine. That's fine. So like during the Obama administration, we got the Affordable Care Act. And there was a ton of pushback to that. Now most Americans support it and don't want to take it away. You know what I mean? So, okay. But what we're talking about is because of a crisis like, you know, healthcare costs going up, or elderly people going into poverty, or an economic crisis like the Great Depression or the Great Recession of 2008, you know, it's usually the national government that is capable of stepping in and addressing the crisis, right? Okay. Now, let's go to this part. I forgot to say, so the Lyndon Johnson's programs, how are these programs funded? Federal government, okay? Don't you have a Medicare tax? It's a federal tax, okay? Comes out of federal tax revenues, etc. Who implements most of these programs? The states. Okay, same place you go for welfare and public housing, DFACS, on the same application process, they'll see what all you qualify for, okay? And so that includes Medicaid and SNAP, okay? All right, now, so again, it's cooperation. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the money situation there. Let me see, okay. So, now I'll get on this slide, let me show you where I'm in the outline. So now we're going to talk about how do we get that cooperation? I've already talked about money, right? So that money I'm talking about is, the technical term for it is grant and aid. I'm going to give you some notes in just a second. Grant and aid. And we call this the carrot approach, right? Because the federal government is dangling a carrot. Do you have to take the carrot? Does the horse have to take the carrot? No. Okay? It just says, I'm not gonna do what you want me to do, and I'm not gonna get the carrot, okay? So these grants are basically carrots to get the states to do something the federal government wants to do but can't do itself. The federal government doesn't have the constitutional authority to implement a federal health care program, right? To a certain extent. So, like Medicaid. So, the states basically implement it, right? The federal says, here's the money, okay? Now, let's also talk about this term, mandates. I'll put it up here on the board. And then we'll drill down into the grant part. So, the first term is the federal mandates, okay? And so you put your notes like this, federal mandates. A federal mandate is a requirement, you know, like a mandate when you're mandated to do something, you follow the mandate, is a federal requirement, it's a requirement in federal law, is what I meant to say. It's a requirement in federal law. Okay. Now, there are two types of mandates. Funded mandates and, I'm gonna leave space here, okay? unfunded mandates. What do you think I mean by a funded mandate versus an unfunded mandate? Who's talking, sorry? Yes? Yes. This mandate is funded by the federal government. This one is not. It's still a mandate, but only one comes with the money, you understand? To do it. Okay. So we'll talk about in a minute. Then if they don't have the carrot, then how do they get the states to do it, right? We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so under funded mandates. So the money, remember, is called a grant and aid. Grant and aid. A lot of people just say a federal grant, okay? But that's the technical name for it, grant and aid, or grants and aid. Okay? These are typically, just like the carrot is voluntary, right? The carrot's not, you will eat this, take the money. I do my kids sometimes. Typically, voluntary. My husband's more like that, you will eat it, you will like tuna. And I'm like, honey, she's 6. Who likes tuna at age 6? We're good checks on each other. Some people do. Did you raise your hand at age 6, you like tuna? Sometimes I'll develop the taste buds for it, but just so you know, so you're not like shoving food in your kid's face or grounding for duty, your taste buds develop over time, you understand that? So something they don't like now, it's not always because they're being stubborn, sometimes it is. My 9-year-old is so stubborn. But it's their taste buds develop over time, that's why, or something is weird for them, and then they like it 3 years later, right? That's, just so you know, they don't torture your chicken. Sometimes they are messing with you, okay? You ever notice, like, you just say, that you want them to try something, and they don't even really know quite yet what they're gonna try, but they're just resistant to it. And now that they've decided they're gonna resist it, it could be almost anything, and they still will say no. No, I'm just gonna say no regardless now. Okay, now, I'll give you parent advice any day you want, all right. Okay, now, typically voluntary. An example is Medicaid. Okay? Technically, the states didn't have to take the money, but they did because it'd be crazy not to take the money. You can ensure that your low-income citizens have health insurance, and that reduces emergency room visits, right? And it helps to make insurance costs go up even higher. As a state, you'd be crazy not to take that money, right? And the federal government's paying for it? Sure, we'll take it, okay? Things weren't as partisan and polarized back then as they are now. Alright, so it's technically, it's a Medicaid grant and aid. Alright. Let me move on from that. And then we'll come back to the unfunded stuff just a second. Alright. Okay, here we go. Alright, so it's the carrot approach, use the money. Okay, so this is what I had basically coming up before. Medicaid is a grant and aid, alright? You know how you hear about all that research money was cut to the National Institute of Health this past year? The Trump administration just took away all the money and has took away money from universities engaged in like cancer research and stuff. That's what I'm talking about. These are like federal grants. Okay? These are grants that goes to those, and so that's being talked about in courts as well. Okay, but anyway, you don't have to write all that down. Medicaid is a good one. Now, let me show you. Actually, I'm going to come back to the unfunded mandates just a minute. So here you can see that this is federal grants to state and local governments. So category of health has gone up. Okay, this is because you guys ever heard of Peach Care? Federal grant. Georgia just puts a name on it and administers it, right? But it's a federal grant created by the Clintons, or the Clinton administration. So that's why one of the reasons why you see Peach Care is here. That's one reason why you see federal grants increase, okay? Because the Peach it's called state health insurance for children or something like that. And then you're probably seeing here the Great Recession, stimulus, and all that stuff, right? But what no, that's health, you're seeing, oh, I mean, Affordable Care Act is what you're seeing there. Okay, so, but you can see that, you can see a fairly high percent of state money comes from the federal government. You guys see that? About 20 to 25% of the money a state has is actually supplied by the federal government. About a fifth to a fourth. All right, now, let's talk about two types of grants and aid. There's a lot here on the page. All right, the first type is a categorical grant. This is tied to a particular program, like Medicaid. Medicaid is a categorical grant. And that means it has strings attached. You can, it's literally called the Medicaid grant, okay? Or grant name for Medicaid. And you can only get the money if the state implements Medicaid exactly the way the federal government says to implement it. You follow me? These people are eligible, and this is what they get. So, categorical grants are tied to a particular program or a very narrow purpose. Head Start is an example, SNAP is an example, Medicaid as well. And the state only gets the money if they agree and then do exactly the way the federal government says to do it. So there's strings attached to that money, okay? Now, don't worry about the small print, don't worry about it. When it comes to a categorical grant, if you are eligible for the money, you will get the service, okay? The state will get the money from the federal government and then they'll make sure you have Medicaid. See what I'm saying? If you're eligible, you get it, okay? It's like a formula thing the state gets. Now, block grants. A block grant is for a broader area or purpose. And then the state can decide exactly what the money is used for, okay? So, for example, under block grants, I have an example back there already. Yeah. Highway funds, it goes to highways, but how states use it is kind of up to them, okay? It could be increase, buy more emergency help vehicles, the vehicles that help people on the, like 85 and stuff, it could be buy more of those. It could be create HMV lanes. It could be expand a highway. You see what I mean? It's very general, isn't it? Social Services Fund is an actual block grant that goes to the state. Social services could be a lot of things. It could be Meals on Wheels. It could be more support for feedback, whatever. Okay, so the thing is though, the states, they get a certain amount of money that was approved by Congress, and when they run out of it, that's it. Y'all ever heard of this low-income energy assistance program? It's called HEAT in Georgia, H.E.A.T. Many people who qualify for it don't get it, okay? I've been in such hard times before that I've applied for HEAT, okay? Before I had full-time work, I went through the Great Recession, okay? I hope you were struggling for a little bit there. And, anyway, and I have applied for that, and you get the letter back that says, sorry, we're not taking anymore, because there's no more money. Block grants, the set amount is approved by Congress, and it doesn't matter what the state's need is, it's all they get, okay? All they get. Here, you'll get it if you qualify no matter what. All right, now, let's move on from that. And we're gonna talk about the stick as opposed to the carrot. Okay, now, some people argue, remember the centralized federalism? Centralized federalism is this idea that the states are dominated by the federal government, okay? It's not an equal division of authority, okay? It's not cooperation so much as it is the federal government is coercing the state. So I'm doing like an arm twisting, right? Okay? And your kids are going to go into the store. Well, you're going. Okay? You ever gotten the arm twist from the parent? Well, we all gotten that at some point? Some of you escaped that somehow? Okay. Or you just not this thing, whatever. Yeah. Arm twisting, okay? So, okay, you got Hannah, right? You got the arm twist, okay? Well, why didn't you just, get out of the arm twist?
It's my parent.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you try to get it, it's gonna exactly. It's like too painful to say no, right? Okay, when your parents, you know, oh, okay, you don't wanna unload the dishwasher, and I ask nicely, okay, well now, you know, if you don't unload it, you don't get to watch TV for the 2 minutes. Okay, so you got a little bit of option there, right? But it's painful to say no, isn't it? It's very painful, okay. So, so this is how the federal government has become coercive, okay? It's making it too painful for the states to say no. All right, so let's talk about, let me come down to here, okay? Even funded mandates, which are typically voluntary, the state, it's a little coercive because the state can't give up the money once they've been given it, okay? So if your parents are giving you help to go to college, maybe they give you a block grant that says, we'll give you $500 a month and use it on whatever you need to, but the requirement is that you have to stay in college, right? Yeah? And you can put that $500 towards your own rent, you can put it towards books or whatever. That's like a block grant, right? You become dependent on that $500, don't you? Absolutely, you become dependent on it. And so if your parents say, if you don't take more hours in school, we're gonna take the money away, or something like that, right? You kind of almost have no choice, don't you? Right? It's coercive, okay? You can still say, we'll take it away with it, but it's gonna be too painful. So states have become so dependent on federal money, and they can't give the things that citizens want on their own dime, that even the carrot has become coercive, right? If the horse is not gonna have enough food that day without the carrot, he's gonna come get the carrot, right? Okay, now, beating you guys to death with metaphors. Okay, now let's come up here. What about unfunded mandates? An unfunded mandate is a mandate, it's a requirement, but you're not given the money to implement it. The state is not given the money to implement it. So how do you get the state to implement it? Compliance is gonna be coerced or forced, and let me come back to this other slide to show you that. I had it, yeah, this was, what was it, the slide I was talking about? Although it does the job. Okay, is it this? Yeah. So we'll just keep on this slide, this is basically what we need. So it's enforced through, okay, if you don't do this thing, you could be subject to a civil lawsuit. Or there could be a criminal penalty if somebody gets sick because you didn't follow the mandate. So for example, the Clean Water Act, if a state is not abiding by, or even a company is not abiding by the Clean Water Act, and people get sick, y'all heard of the Flint, Michigan, the lead in the pipe, the lead thing? You could have people, if they were very negligent, they could go to jail, right? Or people get sued. You see how that's kind of coercive? States don't want to get sued. State officials don't want to go to jail. Companies the same way. The Americans with Disabilities Act. What if you were denied a service, a public service because of your disability? What could you do? Sue. That's a civil penalty, isn't it? So that's the coercion, right? I'm fine with that coercion, okay? I'm not saying it's bad, y'all understand? It depends on what we're talking about, okay? But it does kind of force states to comply, doesn't it? Okay? Okay. All right, now. So that's how those work. Let me move on. And then we will, I had some other stuff here. This just goes into a little bit more detail. So, when we say the stick approach, I mean like, that's where you're not given the money to do it, right? Okay, you're not given the money to make sure there's an elevator in the building. But, you know, if you don't do this thing, it'll be very painful, right? That's the stick, you know, beat the horse instead of offer the carrot, okay? Okay, that's what I mean by the stick approach. All right. But here's an example of one you might read about in your textbook. The legal drinking age in every state is what? 21. States have a lot to do with alcohol policy, okay? That's kind of their thing. 21. All right. And it wasn't, so is it just a coincidence that every state has it at 21? No. Decades ago, some states had it at 18, like Louisiana did. The federal government was lobbied by Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD, and lobbied by them and said, you need to do something about this because young people are increasingly dying in car accidents because of DUIs. They're the ones drunk. And, so they lobbied the federal government. The federal government came up with this. Said, okay, Louisiana, if you don't raise your drinking age to 21, you know those highway funds we give you? We don't have to give that to you anymore. That's what they did. That's how they got the states to all get on the same page. They said, you don't do this, your federal highway funds, you can say bye-bye to those. Okay? Okay. All right, just give you that example. All right, moving on, and we're about to close out this lecture and start, get going another one. Okay, now, I'm gonna go to the 1970s right now. A lot of this stuff has happened since the 1970s. I'm gonna kind of go back in time and tell you about, there's been, what you've kind of seen is over time, federal government gets involved in more and more areas, doesn't it? And it's kind of getting coercive and making the states do things. There has been pushback to this, okay? There has been pushback. And it kind of started with Richard Nixon, okay? When you started to get this pushback. States and some lawmakers saying, hey, wait a minute, the states should be able to do this without coercion, all right? So now we're gonna get to this new period. Beginning in the 1970s, we see devolution has occurred. So it's not just been evolving to more government power, devolving is going the opposite way, okay? It's been devolving some. And what we mean by devolving or devolution is the return or giving back of powers to the states. So devolution is about, this was something that the federal government took or tried to take, but it was forced to give it back, the power. Everybody follow me? Okay. Forced to give it back the power. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. Congress could decide on its own to get out of something, to give the power back to the states. It might be just which party's in charge, you know. Republicans, for a while, were the party that was more the states' rights, although today that's really up in the air. So like Nixon, Reagan, you know, deregulating things and all that kind of stuff. So you could reform a federal law that gave the federal government more say in the area, or you could just change the law a little bit, or you could repeal it altogether. The third way that power can be devolved back to the states, returned back to the states, is the Supreme Court says, federal government, no more, you can't do this. That makes sense? Okay. Only the states can do that. Here, let me just see what we got here. This is just going to like, federalism can be a hard topic, so, you know, got a lot of detail up here. These are some examples of devolving. So like, I said in the 1980s, Reagan did a lot of deregulation. 1990s, federal government passed the gun-free school zones ban. I think this is U.S. versus Lopez. And the Supreme Court said, federal government, you don't have the authority to say whether a school zone can allow guns or not. Only the states can, okay? And then Obama, through the Affordable Care Act, tried to get states to expand Medicaid to cover more people, to where just you by yourself could qualify for Medicaid if you're low income. Because as Medicaid stands before this, you can only get Medicaid if you are low income but and have kids, low income and pregnant, or low income and disabled. That's the only way you can qualify for Medicaid. Just being low income all by yourself doesn't qualify, okay? So in the Affordable Care Act, the Obama administration said, okay, states, we're gonna do more Medicaid funding. We want you to cover even people who are just low income, right? Like not even, regardless of whether they're pregnant or not, for example. And the Supreme Court, and the Affordable Care Act was kind of coercive. State, if you don't expand Medicaid like we say to, you're gonna lose all your Medicaid funding, right? Get it, arm twist? But the Supreme Court has gotten more conservative, right? the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that, it's being too coercive, you're basically not giving them a real choice, that makes sense? And so we're now in a situation where states, including Georgia, said, no, thank you, we don't even want the money, we're not expanding Medicaid. So you have a difference of benefits across states. Okay, if Georgia had expanded Medicaid, probably some of you in this classroom would qualify for it. Your parents don't have health insurance that you can get on, and you can't afford it yourself. I'm imagining some of you are probably in that situation. You would be able to qualify for Medicaid. Sorry, you live in Georgia. If you lived in Arizona or Nevada, you'd have it. You would have health insurance, okay? So, listen, Republicans in Georgia have been resistant to expanding it. And that's one of the reasons why you've seen rural hospitals shut down, because there are people, they have a lot of people who can't afford the bills, and they don't qualify for Medicaid. So, they shut down. All right. This actually shows you, even some Republican states over time have said, okay, I guess we should do this because it's getting bad. But Georgia is still not one of those states. Resisted. Okay, so those are the states that, the green are the states that have not expanded Medicaid. All right, okay. That's it for federalism. So, let me take you over here to iCollege and just make sure we're all on the same page. You guys notice I put some announcements up recently to kind of help, okay? Let me go to, so we're gonna transition to a new topic. So I'm just gonna show you some things while you get ready, I guess, for this new topic. All right, let's go to content. Okay, so, Constitution Day stuff, I'll get that graded at some point soon. So there's your test model, all right? Read the descriptions on all this stuff, which you can see from this view. So there's another thing on General Studies, Skills, and Advice. I recommend reading that. This is a federalism Kahoot challenge. It's just practice. It's not required. If it didn't work for you a day or two ago, I fixed that, okay? So that should work now. If it stops working again, just email me and let me know when it's a quick fix. There's a test one study guide. This is gonna show you the topics that are on the test, and you should know this, you should know that, and then you're gonna see the key terms as well. So if you're wondering, is she gonna test me on this key term? The textbook says it, but I don't think she said it in class or in the PowerPoint. You can look at the study guide and see that, okay? Cases, all that kind of stuff. The practice test is just 10 questions, and it's designed to help you get a feel for what the test is gonna be kind of similar to. It's not comprehensive, okay? So that there, and then so the test opens in the morning, and you have until Sunday night to take it. Yes?
There's no notes, no emails.
Yes, no, it's webcam is there and everything, yeah. So yes, no notes, okay? So you guys practice with the webcam on chapter 2 quiz, but yes, it's not an open book test.
When does it open?
Tomorrow morning. Yeah, okay, so you can spend time studying, but you can take it as early as tomorrow, but you have until Sunday. It's gonna be about 60 minutes in length, it's gonna be close to 50 questions, so you see that information here, okay? So yeah, it's the same as if you were taking it in class, you understand? But we just don't have time for that because there's so much content in this course, that we do it online, okay? But it's the same as if you were taking it in class and we're standing over here and saying, keep your eyes on your own paper. Don't you look at what's in your book, okay? That's how it is, okay? So don't be freaked out by that. It's the same situation, okay? And go, oh, there's a clock running, it's making me, oh, there's a freaking clock on the wall. We all have clocks on our phones, don't we? I mean, like, on our watches, we can't stay in here for 3 hours and take the test, can we? Okay? And you don't need that long anyway. So don't be freaked out by that. It's just as if you were taking it here. So make sure that you're in a quiet place and nobody's gonna interrupt you. You guys should know what to do, all right? Okay. Once you get in there, you should already have respondents downloaded, right? So you'll just hit launch this time, okay? If you didn't download, then of course Any questions? Okay, all right, now, let's move on to civil rights, so starting part 2 of the course, so we don't get too far behind here. So civil rights is not on the test you're about to take, it's on the next test. And that's very clear in the study. Okay, so you've learned about some things that, you know, like in your history class, you learn some of the stuff. You learn about like the civil rights movement and Martin Luther King Jr. and all that stuff, right? We do a little bit of history in here, but we're more focused on the legalities, okay? The politics, okay? That's what we're focused on here. Okay. Now, when you submit the test, you're not gonna know you're not gonna know your grade, okay? I don't go over the test until after the due date. And I manually do that, and then I publish everybody's at one time. So, that you won't know once you submit the test, okay? Just so you know, you're not looking for, you know, to be able to look at the test and know your grade.
Bro, this class is so easy, bro. Freak out of here. I need to take no notes. I already took notes. Look, bro.
All right. Okay, so you see the term civil rights. You have probably also heard the term civil liberties. Okay, civil rights is not the same as civil liberties. Okay, these are completely two different sets of things. There's a chapter on civil rights, there's a whole other chapter on civil liberties, which tells you they're not the same thing. We're going a little out of order in the textbook though, okay? So when you, get to, AJ, you're on your phone a lot. Remember the policy in the classroom?
Yeah.
So, so chapter 5 is civil rights, chapter 4 is civil liberties. So we're not going straight in order in the textbook, so we're done with that, okay? But you can see what chapter is in mind. Okay, so, I'll give you a heads up with civil liberties. Civil liberties are individual freedoms that are protected by the Constitution. So like free speech, okay, right to a lawyer. We'll learn all that stuff. Bill of Rights type stuff. We'll learn that in the next topic. Civil rights have to do with equality, okay, equality. Government assurances and protections for equal treatment. So when you think civil rights, you should be thinking equality. Government assurances or guarantees of equal treatment. All right, so we're going to talk about briefly why do we have these assurances? Why is there a need for these things? Although there's some people that would say there isn't a need. And so we'll do that. Where are these assurances and then why? Okay, so you have government assurances of equality in the Constitution. Let's see where I need to be here. That's just the detail that I was talking about. There we go. So you have government assurances of equality in the Constitution and in federal laws. Remember the 14th Amendment? Equal Protection Clause. That's civil rights. Remember 15th Amendment? And we'll learn some more. Those are civil rights amendments. Government assurances of equal treatment. Federal laws, which is a law passed by Congress, right? A bill. Americans with Disabilities Act, Voting Rights Act. We'll learn some of that stuff, okay? I'm just showing you that these are in federal law and they're in the Constitution, and what states have can vary by state, can it? Okay? So like, Georgia was one of only 4 or 5 states that did not have a hate crime law, okay? Until we changed our minds when a man named Ahmaud Arbery was pretty much lynched. Y'all remember that case in Brunswick? Okay? All right, wasn't by rope, but it was basically a modern day lynching. Okay. then George said, oh, I guess we'll have to do it after he's dead. All right. Okay, now, so let's talk about bias, okay? So bias exists. We are human. Therefore, we are all capable of having a bias, correct? Okay. So, even Madison said human nature, right? And so this is just giving you a bunch of examples, but what I want to focus on is explicit versus implicit bias. Explicit bias, and so just focus on that line right here, okay? You don't have to write all these examples down, just explicit and then what implicit is. It's an attitude that somebody is consciously aware of having, okay? Okay, like if you hear somebody, okay, a white supremacist, that's an explicit bias, right? Okay, okay, it's pretty obvious explicit one, right? They know, they think they're better, right? Because of their superior simply because of their race, right? Or color of their skin, and they believe people who are not white are inferior and not as qualified and not as smart and not, you get what I'm saying? That's obviously, that person knows that they have that bias. They think their bias is justified, don't they? People with explicit biases think their bias is justified, okay, out of ignorance, but they so they don't have it. But there are implicit biases as well, and you probably have some, okay? Probably everybody in this room has at least one bias, right? And it doesn't have to be about race or skin color or any of that stuff. It could be, you could have a bias towards people that are skinny. You could have a bias towards people that are overweight. You could assume things about people who are overweight. We understand, right? Sometimes when somebody is overweight, people like blame them, you know what I mean? And oh, you're just this way because you eat too much, or you don't go to the gym, or you don't exercise. And that's not actually always the case. Sometimes medication, it causes people to gain weight, right? And increase that. So anyway, so a bias, but you may not be really realizing that you're doing that, right? You may not really realize that you're kind of assessing people with this characteristic differently, and that you may end up treating them differently. You see what I'm saying? So that's an implicit bias. It's one that you subconsciously have, but you're not necessarily aware of it. But guess what? Whether it's explicit or implicit, it can shape how you respond and handle things. It shapes your actions, okay? And government is made up of humans, isn't it? So these are some examples, implicit bias can become so ingrained in us. You may have the bias because it was put in you by somebody else, your parents. You may have the bias because of the media, okay? I don't watch Fox News, but if you watch Fox News, I completely understand why you think immigrants are all violent, okay? If you watch Fox News and you look at immigrants as tending to be violent, I totally get why you feel that way, even though it's statistically incorrect. Because Fox News makes a habit of, an undocumented immigrant did something, let's put it on here, okay? All right? Even though statistically, even undocumented immigrants are way less likely to commit crimes than citizens, because what happens if you commit a crime? You get deported, right? Usually undocumented immigrants don't want to be deported, right? So they're like, let me not go too fast, Okay. So like media coverage, you guys heard about how like black people are portrayed on the local news, Okay. So there's this bias that sets up in society over time that black men are violent. Okay. And what does that lead to? Quick to shoot. Police quick to shoot. And that can even happen if the police officer is black. Okay? You've heard some instances where the police officer was black or Hispanic or whatever. That's because that person has had even that police officer has had a bias ingrained in them that they don't realize is even affecting them, even though they're also black. Y'all understand what I'm getting at here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You're very conscious of it, you know you have that bias, and you believe it's justified. Yeah. Yeah, you don't realize that there's been a bias, however you got it, but it is impacting your decisions. So, an example I was giving, you might be, you might not realize it, but whether you're black or white, you're more likely to pull the trigger when you're dealing with an unarmed black man as opposed to dealing with an unarmed white man, because it's kind of been ingrained in you that, you know, because of media portrayals and stuff, that black men are violent. And there's another one too, studies show this, that police officers, again, regardless of race, tend, and it could be more white than black, I'm not saying that, but police officers tend to view black men or boys as older than they are. Okay? They tend to perceive them as older, so they don't give them as much leeway. Does that make sense? Like Trayvon Martin, you know. Okay, so you can see that bias right there with Trayvon Martin. You know, like a teenager, you know, got a hoodie on, must be violent, must be up to no good. Okay, that's the bias there. Okay, okay. I hope that's clear, right, everybody? Oh, here's another one. Okay, I have talked to multiple women who refuse to vote for a woman president, and these are women. Okay, and they've been women that are kind of in leadership positions. And I think, well, what the hell are you doing in that position if you think we're so incapable? It doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. Okay? And it also ignores the fact that there are actually women who have run countries and do send people to war. Yes, women are capable of sending people to war. Okay? Okay. So, anyway, these same women will reference the period affecting the policy. It's just ridiculous. All right, now, moving on. 206. All right. Okay, this next one. All right, now. Okay, this one, this term has gotten controversial. I'm not telling, so let me be real clear about this, okay? I'm not telling you, okay, that you should agree that this is a problem, okay? I'm making sure you know what it is. Did y'all see the difference? Okay? Just like whether you want to be a conservative or a liberal, I'm going to teach you what those things are. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is out there. It's in a lot of scholarly literature, but some people say, this is hooey, okay? Just want to put that out there. I'm not telling you what to believe, but you do need to understand what it is so you recognize it when you see the argument. So there's individual racism, okay? Like when you know, an individual person has racist beliefs, right? The other thing is these are interchangeable, systemic, sometimes called structural racism, sometimes called institutional racism. So let's talk about that, what that is. And we're gonna watch this video on systemic racism. But generally speaking, it's this idea that racist and biases have been ingrained into institutions, and it affects how they operate, and it affects the policies, which then affects outcomes of people. And it can reverberate across their lives and in other aspects of their lives as well. So let's see what is meant by systemic racism.
Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin, who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university, the same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism.
Okay, so, when they said like it's one factor in why black unemployment is high, it doesn't say it's the sole contributor, you know, it's one factor. Y'all ever watch Blackish?
Oh, yeah.
They had a whole episode on, remember they were arguing over what to name their fourth kid? Okay, that was Bo even references that study. They did that whole conflict over that. Okay, now, moving on then. I've got roll except for a few people, so I'll do that at the end, just because I'm still learning some names. Okay, so, we can look at some of this pretty quickly here. So, what we're gonna end up doing is going, we are gonna first look at the African American Civil Rights Movement. And that one we look at first because it's had the most impact. It's the biggest movement and the most impact, okay? And so we'll do that, and then we'll eventually look at other movements, okay? I'm still gonna talk about some stuff here, okay? So, what we wanna understand is, what was the pretext, what was the reason that we end up with an African American Civil Rights Movement? It's because we're not treated equally, right? That tends to happen. You end up with a movement when people are not treated equally. So you guys remember the Civil War Amendment? We just talked about it a minute ago. Let me come over there. There's my favorite president again. Okay. All right, so we're not really worried about the 13th Amendment, slavery was abolished, okay? The 14th Amendment, I told you, you get the birthright citizenship clause because people who were enslaved were denied citizenship, right? But you're going to see, even after the Civil War ends and you get these amendments, 1868, 1870, you're going to see that black people were still denied due process. They were still denied the equal protection of the laws. They were still denied the right to vote, even though the amendment's there. And this goes on for 100 years. A century of this occurs. Okay, so I'll stop there. When we come back, we're going to look at how these things were undermined quickly, and then we're going to get into legislation and constitutional changes and on have a Maddie in class, no, Kyle, you're at state, you're, okay, good. And Brandon, no, you're Brandon. Okay. Brandon, Kyle, Jackson Hudson, Jackson Hudson. All right, Devin. All right, I'm almost done. Abby, you're right there. Okay. And then, let me jump. to
Bro,
the other
that
two
class
names.
was 2
You're
hours
going to
long, bro.
alphabet last name, I've already got you. Christopher Ramos. Christopher Ramos, okay, not here. And then, one more name, everybody, so Beverly. Beverly? Oh, thank you, okay. All right, great.
Bro, bro, bro. That right there, bro. Bro. Bro, that jump started at 1:30 and ended at 2:15, bro. Bro, chat, bro, you have to realize something, bro. I was paying attention literally the whole time, bro. I paid attention the whole entire time, bro. So all y'all saying, oh, take notes and blah, blah, blah. Bro, I've been taking all the notes, bro. We're just reviewing for a test. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know what I'm doing, bro. Like, stop all this madness, bro. Stop all this freaking madness, bro. I already know what I'm doing, bro. Is that my boy? Hold on. Oh my gosh, he's rising up. Bro, he's rising up. This guy, bro. This guy's risen up, bro. Why is he looking? Like, oh, look at this cop. W cop. I say hi, chat. Nah, I ain't gonna. Let me chill. Mine's only 30 minutes. All right, bro.